Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Complete Devotion. In this session we shall discuss about Class 6, Chapter 6, New Questions and Ideas. Here we will discuss about Buddha and Mahavira's age. How their preaching was. The story of Buddha. Siddhartha, also known as Gautama, the name of Buddha was actually Siddhartha and he was also known as Gautama. He was the founder of Buddhism and he was born about 2500 years ago. This was a time of rapid change in the lives of the people. Some kings in the Mahajanapadas were growing more powerful. We learnt about what are these Mahajanapadas in the previous chapters. New cities were developing and life was changing in the villages. Many thinkers were trying to understand these changes in the society. They also wanted to try and find out the true meaning of life. They were all aiming to find out the true meaning of life. They had many questions in themselves. They want to find the true meaning of life. The Buddha also was in search of this. Buddha belonged to a small Gana known as Sakya Gana. Buddha belonged to the Sakya Gana and was a Kshatriya. We learnt about different types of people in the previous session, right? Brahmins, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas. Okay? So Buddha belonged to Kshatriya. When he was a young man, he left the comforts of his home. He was the son of a king. He left the comforts of his home in search of the knowledge. Why he came out? In search of the knowledge. He came out of his home. He wandered for several years, meeting and holding discussions with other thinkers. He had many discussions with the other thinkers. He finally decided to find his own path to realization and meditated for days on end under the peepal tree. You should know this. Which tree he meditated? It's a peepal tree at Bodh Gaya in Bihar, where he attained enlightenment. After that, he was known as Buddha or the Wise One. Buddha meaning is Wise One. He then went to Sarnath near Varanasi, where he taught for first time. He spent the rest of his life traveling on foot, going from place to place, teaching people till he passed away at Kusinara. You should know where he passed away and where he gave the first lecture. The Buddha taught that life is full of suffering and unhappiness. He taught life is full of suffering and unhappiness. This is caused because we have cravings and desires. This unhappiness is because of cravings and desires, which often cannot fulfilled. Sometimes even if we get what we want, we are not satisfied and we want even more on some other things. The Buddha described this as thirst or tana. What our desires are, he described it as a thirst. It is also called as tana. He taught that this constant craving could be removed by following meditation in everything. He also taught people to be kind. His teachings included to be kind and to respect the lives of others, including the animals also. He believed that the results of our actions called as karma, whether good or bad, both good and bad actions, we call it as karma, which affect us in this life and the next. So it is going to affect us in this life and the next life also. The Buddha taught in the language of ordinary people, Prakrit, so that everybody could understand this message. So he used a language of local people. So you can see here a structure. You can see the structure here. So this is the stupa at Sarnath. This building known as a stupa was built to mark the place where Buddha first taught his message. Okay, that is Sarna. So this is the place. He also encouraged people to think for themselves, rather than to simply accept what he said. Though he said many things, he made people to think about it by themselves. Now moving on to the next page, here one story is there, we'll see that. It is the story of Kisa Gautami. This story tells about in search of a lady will go in search of some seeds, okay, where there is a condition which is kept by Buddha. It should be bought from a place where no one has died. So finally she will not be able to bring that. So it means to say everybody in every house it happens. We shall see this. This is a famous story about a Buddha. Once there was a woman named Kisa Gautami whose son died. She was so sad that she roamed through the streets of the city carrying the child with her, asking for help, bring him back to life. She wanted to bring him back to life. So a kind man took her to the Buddha. The Buddha said, bring a handful of mustard seeds, I will bring your child back to life. So he gave a word to that lady. Kisa Gautami were overjoyed by hearing that. But Buddha gently stopped her and added, the seeds must come from a house of family where nobody has died. Kisa Gautami went from door to door, but whenever she went, she found out that someone or the other, father, mother, sister, brother, husband, wife, child, uncle, aunt, grandmother had died. So she could not bring the mustard seeds. So finally it is understood that it is not possible to get her son back to life. Upanishads, around the time that Buddha was preaching and perhaps the little earlier, other thinkers also tried to find answers to difficult questions. There are many thinkers who are having questions like this about their existence. Some questions they had about their life. Some of them wanted to know about life after death. Others wanted to know why sacrifices should be performed. There are some questions they had. Many of these thinkers felt that there was something permanent in the universe that would last even after death. So there was something permanent in the universe that should last even after this. They were in search of this. They described this as the Atma or the individual soul. They were thinking about this soul or Atma. And the Brahman or the universal soul. They were also thinking about the universal soul. They believed that ultimately both Atma and Brahman were one. They were thinking that Atma and Brahman were one. Many of their ideas were recorded in Upanishads. They were part of the later Vedic text. Upanishad literally means approaching and sitting near the text contain conversations between the teachers and students. So it is a conversation between the teachers and the students. Often the ideas were presented through simple dialogues. Most Upanishadic thinkers were men, especially Brahmins or Rajas. Occasionally there is a mention of women thinkers such as Gargi, who was famous for her learning and participated in debates held in royal courts. Poor people rarely took part in these discussions. They are not taking part of the discussions here most of the time. One famous exception was Satyakama Jabala, who was named after his mother, the slave woman Jabali. He had a deep desire to learn about reality. was accepted as a student by Brahmin teacher. He was accepted as a student by a Brahmin teacher. So, who is this? He is a Satyakama Jabala. So, he was accepted, he was desired to learn about reality, he was accepted by a Brahmin teacher. His name is Gautama, and he became one of the best known thinkers of the time. Many of the ideas of the Upanishads were later developed by the famous thinker Shankaracharya. You would have heard this name, Shankaracharya. So, these ideas of Upanishads were later developed by Shankaracharya. About we will study in the later chapter. Now we will see another one story about a beggar was there, and we will see about 6 schools of Indian philosophy. What are the 6 schools of Indian philosophy? Over centuries, India's intellectual exploration of truth came to be represented by 6 systems of philosophy. What are the different 6 systems of philosophy? We'll see. These are known as Vaishika, Visheka, Nyaya, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, and Vedanta or Uttara Mimamsa. So these are the 6 systems of philosophy are said to have been founded by sages Konada, Gautama, Kapila, Patanjali, Jaimini, and Vyasa respectively. These philosophies still guide scholarly disclosure in the country. German-born British Indologist Friedrich Max Muller has observed that the 6 systems of philosophy were developed over many generations with contributions made by individual thinkers. However, today we find an underlying harmony in their understanding of truth, although they seem distinct from each other. So here we can understand what we should know. What are the 6 schools of Indian philosophy? Who have found those? Okay, those names we should know. Coming to the story, the wise beggar. This tells about a discussion between the beggar and a sage. Okay. So here the sage will learn something from the beggar. The sage was in search of something and they avoided the beggar to share their food. And beggar told he is also a part of this world where they are searching for, a part of this universal soul where the sages were searching for. Then the sages realized that what their mistake was, and finally they shared their food with him. Okay, that's the story. We shall see. Here is a dialogue based story from one of the most famous Upanishads and Chandogaya Upanishads. Shaunaka and Abhipatirin were 2 sages who worshipped the universal soul. So they worshipped the universal soul. Once they sat down and to eat, a beggar came and asked for some food. "We cannot spare anything for you," Shaunaka said. "Learned sirs, whom do you worship?" the beggar asked. The universal soul," Abhipatirin replied. "It means that you know that universal soul fills the entire world, right? The universal soul should fill the entire world." So that is a statement given by the beggar here. "Yes, we know that," and the sages nodded. If the universal soul, this statement is to be feels important. If the universal soul fills the whole world, it fills me too, whom I am. But as a part of the world, the beggar asked. He is also a part of the world. "You speak the truth, O young Brahmin. Then, O sages, by not giving me food, you are actually denying food to the universal soul." So, this statement is made by the beggar. It tells that if they are not giving food for this beggar, they are not actually giving anything. They are not giving completely themselves to the universal soul. So the sages realized the truth and what the beggar said and shared their food to him. So this is what the simple lesson what the sages have learned from a beggar. Panini the grammarian, this was also the time when other scholars were at work. One of the most famous was Panini, who prepared the grammar. Panini prepared a grammar for Sanskrit. He arranged the vowels and the consonants in the special order and then used these to create formulae like those we found in algebra. He used those to write down the rules of the language, used to write the rules of the language in a short formula, around 3000 of them. So this is about the Panini. Jainism, now we will study about the Jainism also along with the Buddha. First we noted about Buddhism, now Jainism. The last and 24th Tirthankara of the Jainas, that is Vardhamana Mahavira. This name would have heard in our daily lives, Vardhamana Mahavira. Also spread his message around this time, that is 2500 years ago. That is also similar to the age of where Buddha was there. He was a Kshatriya in practice in Vichavis, a group that was a part of Vajji Sangha, about which we will see later. At the age of 30, he left home and went to live in a forest. For 12 years, he led a hard and lonely life, at the end of which he attained the enlightenment. After 12 years, Vardhamana Mahavira attained the enlightenment. He taught a simple doctrine: men and women who wish to know the truth must leave their homes. So simple doctrine, what he taught was, when men and women who wish to know the truth must leave their homes. They must follow very strictly the rules of ahimsa. They should follow ahimsa. Ahimsa means that is not himsa, that is against to himsa, that is ahimsa. Opposite of himsa. Opposite of violence, that is non-violence. Which means not hurting or killing living beings. All the beings, said Mahavira, long to live. All beings, said Mahavira, long to live. So this is the statement given by Mahavira. To all things life is dear. Ordinary people could understand the teachings of Mahavira. So this is most important. So ordinary people must understand what are the teachings of Mahavira, what are the teachings of Buddha. So they were good in that, and his followers, because they used Prakrit. There were several forms of Prakrit used in different parts of the country and named after the regions in which they are used. For example, the Prakrit spoken in Magadha was known as Magadhi. So this is a Prakrit. Prakrit spoken in the Magadha was known as Magadhi. The followers of Mahavira, who were known as the Jains, the followers of Mahavira, what are they called? They are called as Jains. Had to lead very simple lives, begging for food. They had to be absolutely honest and were especially asked not to steal. So these are some characteristics of those who are followers of Mahavira. Those are Jainas. So what are those? Simple, begging for food, absolutely honest, and they are not stealing anything. Also they have to observe the celibacy, and men had to give up everything including their clothes. They have to give up everything. So Jaina, the word Jaina comes from the term Jina, meaning conqueror. It was very difficult for most men and women to follow these strict rules. Very difficult, as they should follow all those above mentioned. Nevertheless, thousands left their homes to learn and teach new way of life. Thousands were also there to follow that. Many more remained behind and supported those who became monks. There were also supporters for them and nuns providing them with the food. So Jainism was supported mainly by the traders, farmers who had to kill the insects to protect their crops, found it more difficult to follow the rules. So they should follow ahimsa, right? So they cannot kill the insects. So that's the reason they followed it. They it became very difficult for them to follow the rules. Farmers could not go against it. Over the hundreds of years, Jainism spread to different parts of North India and to Gujarat, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. The teachings of Mahavira and his followers were transmitted orally over several centuries. They were written down in the form in which they are presently available in a place called Vallabhi in Gujarat. It's available in Vallabhi in Gujarat about 1500 years ago. Coming to the Sangha. Both the Mahavira and Buddha felt that only those who left their homes could gain true knowledge. They arranged for them to stay together in a Sangha. So when the men leave their home, right? So when they leave somewhere, they should stay. So they stay together. It's called as a Sangha, in association of those who left their homes. The rules made for Buddhist Sangha were written down in a book called Vinaya Pataka. So this is the Vinaya Pataka is the rules which are present for the Buddhist Sangha. They are written in a book. We call it as a Vinaya Pataka. From this, we know that there were separate branches for men and women. There were separate branches. So they are not together. They are separate. All men could join a Sangha. However, children had to take the permission from their parents and slaves for their masters. The slaves have to take permission from the master and children from the parents to join this. Those who worked for the king had to take permission, and debtors of creditors. So those who work for the king, they should take permission from the king, and the debtors should get permission from their owner, and women had to take their husbands' permission. So those who are other than those people, they have to they are coming and joining the Sangha for their own procedures. Men and women who joined the Sangha led a simple lives. They meditated most of the time and went to cities and villages to beg for food during the fixed hours. So their work was only to meditate, to have a very simple life, to beg for the food, and they should not be violent. They should follow non-violence, ahimsa. They should be as indicated above. There are certain conditions they should follow. That's why they are known as bhikkhus. The Prakrit word for renouncer, it's a beggar. Bhikkhus, or that's called as that term as beggar, and bhikkhunis. Bhikkhus and bhikkhunis are men and women. They taught others and helped one another. They taught and helped one another. They also held meetings to settle any quarrels. They were settling some quarrels that took place within the Sangha. Those who joined the Sangha included Brahmins, Kshatriyas, merchants, laborers, barbers, courtesans and slaves. So the Sangha included all these kind of people. Many of them wrote down the teachings of Buddha. Some of them also composed beautiful poems describing their life in Sangha. So they are composed beautiful poems describing their life in. So the Sangha included whom? They included all these people, and some of them also composed beautiful poems describing about the Sangha. Let's see about monasteries. So this you can observe here. So this is a place where they were meditating. The saints were meditating. So this is a cave hollowed out in the hills. This cave in Karli, present day in Maharashtra, monks and nuns lived and meditated in these shelters. They are used to. Monks and nuns lived in here and meditated in these shelters. You can see here. Monasteries, to begin with, both Jain and Buddhist monks, they were from the place they went from one place to another place throughout the year, teaching the people. The only time they stayed in the place was during the rainy season. During rainy season, they were in the same place when it was very difficult to travel. Then their supporters built temporary shelters. Supporters have built some temporary shelters for them in the gardens, or they lived in natural caves like this in hilly areas. As time went on, many supporters of the monks and nuns and they themselves felt need for more permanent shelters. They also felt they need some permanent shelters, and also monasteries were built. So these were known as viharas. These were known as what? So these permanent shelters, we call it as what? They may ask, what are the monasteries which were built, which are permanent shelters for them, for the nuns and monks, is called as viharas. So the earliest viharas were made of wood, then they made of brick. Some were even in the caves that were dug out in the hills, especially in the Western India. So these viharas are made of what? Initially it was wood, then the bricks, then they were in the caves which are digged out in the hills. Very often the land on which vihara was built was donated by a rich merchant or a landowner or a king. So this land was donated by a rich merchant, a landowner or the king. The local people came with the gifts of food, clothing and medicines for the monks and the nuns. So the local people also supported them. In return, they taught the people. So the monks were teaching them what they know over the centuries. Buddhism spread to many parts of the subcontinent and beyond. Buddhism was very famous. As the time went on, it spread from one subcontinent to another subcontinent. A Buddhist text tells us what it tells. Just as waters of the rivers lose their names and separateness when they flow into the mighty ocean, so the varna and the ranks of the family forgotten when the followers of the Buddha join the other monks. So when they join, so they become monks. Okay, they should forget about whatever their life was before. That's the meaning. The system of ashramas. Around the time when Jainism and Buddhism were becoming popular, Brahmins developed a system of ashramas. What are these ashramas? Here the word ashrama does not mean place where people live and meditate. It's not a place where people are going to live and meditate. It is used to be instead a stage of life. 4 ashramas were recognized. What are the 4 ashramas? That is brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyasa. So these are the 4 ashramas. Brahmin, Kshatriya and Vaishya men were expected to lead simple life and study the Vedas. So these Brahmin, Kshatriya and Vaishyas, they were studying the Vedas during the early years of their life. So that is the term we give them the brahmacharya when they are studying this Vedas. So we give them the term the brahmacharya. Then they had to marry. After this, they will marry and leave some household. They become householders or they become grihasthas. Then they had to live in the forest. They will live in the forest and meditate. That is vanaprastha. Finally, they had to give up everything and become sannyasins. So here we have mentioned the few terms. So that is the ashramas were recognized in the four ways. That is brahmacharya when they were studying the Vedas. That is grihastha once they get married, and vanaprastha means when they go to a forest and live in the forest, and sannyasa they leave everything and become sannyasins. The system of ashramas followed men to spend some part of their life in the meditation. Generally, women were not allowed to study the Vedas and they had to follow the ashramas chosen by their husbands. So this is also an important note. Women were not allowed to study the Vedas and they had to follow the ashramas chosen by their husbands. And also you should remember there are 4 ashramas which were recognized. So this is the end of the chapter 6. Some important dates to remember about Jains and about the Buddhism. The Upanishadic thinkers, the Jaina teacher Mahavira, the Buddha, it was about 2500 years ago. So writing down of the Jaina text, it was about 1500 years ago. So this is about a sixth chapter in the history, class 6. Please like this video, please subscribe for this channel and comment. Thank you all for joining.